Jobs would be filled swiftly, but apparently that's not the case at one hospital in Suffolk. It's struggling to find enough cleaners, despite having advertised for weeks. Victoria Webb has more.
Gillian Randall is a senior housekeeper at West Suffolk Hospital. Her work is extremely important in helping to control infections, and that's why bosses here want to employ another 24 cleaners. 6 weeks ago, they placed the following advert. It said they were looking for someone interested in joining a busy team and that they'd be assisting with the day-to-day cleaning duties that are necessary for the smooth running of the hospital wards. The part-time position was advertised as permanent, with a salary of under £14,000 pro rata. But there's one problem. So far, they've only managed to find 2 recruits.
We've always found it difficult to recruit for housekeepers because we're in quite an area of full employment, so we're always competing with other employers in the town. They're not aware of what a housekeeper perhaps does and the fact that they are part of a ward team. They work with our doctors, they work with our nurses.
West Suffolk Hospital isn't the only employer finding it difficult to attract cleaning staff. We've spoken to another Bury St Edmunds-based company today which is having a similar problem. At a time of high unemployment, many are surprised to hear about the lack of interest in the posts.
It is surprising. What can I say? I think people must be very fussy.
It's a bit shocking, considering, you know, a lot of people haven't got work.
Just today, Unison released the results of a study which shows the importance of having more cleaners on our wards.
One extra cleaner on a ward can make a huge difference to the number of MRSA cases, C-Diff, etc. Something like a 32% reduction over a 6-month period on one ward alone.
While the figures for C. difficile show there are still hundreds of cases each year, for most areas of our region the number of infections has fallen to half the level of the previous results. In the financial year from 2008 to 2009, Northamptonshire and Suffolk had the highest proportion of infections compared to their population. Milton Keynes and Essex had the lowest. Although West Suffolk Hospital is meeting its infection control standards, staff here want to stay on top of the situation. In the last financial year, there were 11 cases of MRSA and 72 cases of C. difficile. It's hoped that by employing more housekeepers, those numbers will continue to fall. With funding put aside for these extra posts, West Suffolk Hospital is not giving up. They know that cleanliness is vital to the hospital and its patients. Victoria Webb, Anglia News, Bury St Edmunds.
Well, stay with us here on Anglia tonight. Up next, all the news from your part of the region.
Amanda's here with the weather, and we meet the DJ who's gone back in time to spin the platters that matter.
Now, when you think of DJs... More news now from your part of the region. An environmental campaigner, David Bellamy, has been in Essex today to plant 40 trees.
He was at Henry Moore Primary School at Church Langley in Harlow as part of the Tree Appeal, which has seen more than 200,000 trees planted at schools nationwide. Lorna Ramsey was there.
At the age of 76, Professor David Bellamy still has a spring in his step. And that's probably because he's at Henry Moore Primary School at Church Langley in Harlow to do one of his favourite things, plant trees.
When I was a kid, I could go out and pick a bunch of wildflowers with my mum in London for her birthday, because they were there and they were all part of kids' education. So if we can bring those things back and help the grassroots, well, the flower roots, if I like to put those flowers back, wow.
Professor Bellamy has been jumping onto our screens for nearly 40 years. He's presented some 400 television programmes, including Anglia Television's wildlife series Survival. Because of his long career, his fan base are of all ages. And after today's visit, it seems he's gained a few more.
Never really met someone famous apart from my cousin.
Who's your cousin?
Phil Ifield plays Colchester.
It's been really interesting meeting him, and he's answered quite a lot of questions. He shouts a lot as well. He's a very loud person.
After all the trees are planted, a song to mark their birthday. Now these children will be encouraged to look after these saplings so they can see many more birthdays in years to come. Lorna Ramsey, Anglia News, Church Langley.
Experts from Norfolk-based Lotus cars are helping to restore a full-size replica of a World War II Spitfire. It was brought to the factory at Hethel near Wymondham by the RAF. It's made of a composite material similar to the car bodies built by Lotus. The aircraft will be displayed in London and Manchester next year to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Battle of Britain.
It needs some localised repairs. It's getting a little bit old now, so we're doing some repair work to repair some gel cracks and prepare it for paint. We're also carrying out some modifications to revert it to a Mark 1A, so it fits in more with the time period with the Battle of Britain.
Gardeners at the historic Ickworth House near Bury St Edmunds have been delving into the past thanks to a surprise discovery.
Yeah, while cleaning out an old filing cabinet, they found a 100-year-old notebook listing every type of plant in the garden in the early 1900s, many of which had been forgotten or are now extinct. Martin Stew reports.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that time stood still here, but a lot has changed in 100 years, and a lot has been forgotten. Until now, and until an historic discovery by gardener Kath Mobbs. Whilst clearing out an old shed, she found a gardener's notebook in a dusty store cupboard. The book was over 100 years old.
We were going through the drawers and we found a lot of weather records dating back to the 50s, which were starting to deteriorate and go mouldy. So we fished them out, and at the bottom of the drawer there was this book, which seems to detail all the planting that was down here in the walled garden in the early 1900s.
The discovery is the missing link in tracing more than a century of the garden's history.
Well, this part of the walled garden is now a vineyard, but between the wars it was an orchard. And Mary McRae, who was the daughter of the Lord of Bristol, described the trees as being so tightly interwoven, it was like walking through lace. And this is one of the trees she would have been describing, more than 100 years on, and it's still bearing fruit.
The book lists 233 different types of apple in this garden alone. It's proof that the amazing diversity of local crops meant there was no need to import exotic fruit.
We do know that fruit was made available from this walled garden to the house every single day of the year. So they could produce enough fruit here, given the different harvest intervals and different storing capabilities of the fruit in question. They could have fruit every day of the year up at the main house.
Now, with the help of Kath's find, it's hoped Ickworth can regrow a piece of that history. Martin Stew, Anglia News, Suffolk.
Lovely. And from one delightful scene to another, a stained glass window at a Norfolk church is being celebrated on a Christmas stamp. Madonna and Child at Ormsby St Michael Church near Great Yarmouth features on the festive first-class stamp issued by the Royal Mail. The window's the work of the artist Henry Holliday and is one of 5 stamps celebrating the impact of the pre-Raphaelite movement on stained glass in churches. The vicar says it's an honour for parishioners.
Oh, they're absolutely delighted. Everybody's very thrilled about it. This is a lovely little church, and it's lovely to have something which focuses our attention on the window, because, of course, we all know it's a lovely window, but you take it a little bit for granted when you see it every Sunday, and it's nice to really look at it and see what a lovely thing it is, and they're all very excited about it.
It is beautiful. Now, grants totalling nearly £60,000